Hello. This is Peter, and today we'll look at Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Graph. So Azure Active Directory is the user store where you can find groups and devices and all those things, and app registrations, right? When you're building apps that interact with Active Directory. Microsoft Graph then extends from there, so it also has those users and groups. But there's more information that you would get out of the Microsoft 365 platform, as well as security and identity information, which is really interesting. To get started with a graph, there's the Microsoft Graph Quick Start, where you can actually select any language. In this case, you see I've already chosen JavaScript, so I can refresh. And then you'll be able to select an application in any language. You can get a client ID, which is the application registration. And with that GUID configured in the sample, you can download the sample. So that's completely ready to go. Now, this is interesting to look at it for if you're just getting used to the Microsoft Graph. If you're a bit more familiar, I think it makes sense to take a sample that's a bit closer to the end result. And we're building web apps with Node. So for that, there's the Microsoft Graph sample Node Express app in the Microsoft Graph organization. And this repo has a website that can sign in users and then create calendar items. First, there's an explanation about how to register the app, which is a manual thing in this case. And then configure the registration information in the sample and then run the sample. What this does is it uses the calendar API to get a list of calendar events, right? So your appointments, and you can create a new one. We can look at it here. This should be still running. The homepage is, I'm already signed in user. Here you see my, this is my Azure AD admin account that I use for my 365 developer environment, which means that I'm admin in all the things in Azure AD and in Microsoft 365, which is useful because now I can grant access to things, right? I can grant access to users, grant access to app registrations. I don't run into limitations. On the calendar tab, you can see a list of events. And look, one of these is called Test from OA. So in Outlook Web Access, I've actually created one. And then that's visible here. And as you can see in the calendar, that is also visible. Now, if you have built Outlook calendar items in the past, this may look like black magic because that was kind of really complex. In this case, you're using an API to fill these fields, right? I'll actually create a second one. Fill the subject, fill the attendees, start date, end date. Let's do Friday. A bit later, like that. Body. Create. Here you go. So the recording 2's demo is done. December 2nd. It's in the calendar invite. See, it's straight there. And so you can create and view calendar items using the API. Okay, that's all very interesting. But what does that need, right? So we've looked at app registrations in the past. And when you go to API permissions, you'll notice that there's a add a permission button and a very big section called Microsoft Graph. You can also provide permissions to the app to call other services, right? To call straight to Azure Storage, for instance, or any other of the other ones configured here. And you can have even add your own APIs. In this case, we're using Microsoft Graph API. Use delegated permissions. And then you'll see that there's a whole list of permissions that you can configure here. For instance, let's use something we'll recognize. Let's say calendar, right? So the calendar thing, and here you can search calendar. So you can grant access to read calendars or to read and write calendars. But so calendars sound simple, right? Messages for emails sound simple, but this goes beyond that, and obviously this is just a configuration. So if you are interested to learn more about those permissions, you can learn more about permissions and consent. There you go. There's a good text, a good article on learn about what all of that is. In this case, I want to show you a bit more. For instance, in the security space, you can filter security scores. You can see what's in the request body. You can see what the permissions are. See, and so what's interesting is that you'll use this API to actually fire a request with a body. In this case, there's no body. It's just give me the top 5 of these objects. The modified permissions make sure that this Graph Explorer, this demo environment, actually has the permissions to ask for this. And when you then run the query, it's going to sign you in, ask for those permissions, you have to grant them. And then you get a result back. In this case, there's an active user count, there's a current score. And so this shows that it goes beyond just calendar items and your profile, right? And to sign in, to get your picture, and to get your email and your manager. There's a whole list of things, applications, but most importantly, identity and access information and security information. And there may be more. So the last thing I wanted to share is that you can use the API and you can use the SDKs. The SDKs make it easier, and they wrap the API. Yeah, and then even the security section has a description, right? It shares, like, why would you use the Microsoft Security API? What can you do with it? You can get alerts, discovery, secure scores, we saw, right? And then it has the REST information and the Graph Explorer. So this is just a step into a whole landscape of content, right? Of MS Graph information. That's really interesting. And it goes beyond what the average productivity worker would want, right? Yes, you can get all the users and groups and devices and all those things, calendar items and emails, but it goes beyond. You can get identity information and security information, and the end is not even in sight. So this was an overview of Azure Active Directory and Microsoft Graph. Hope this triggers your curiosity and looking forward to what you build. Thanks for watching.